Faster. All right, so again, yesterday we talked about files. I went through my PowerPoint, how we read and write to a file, and we had to first, what was the first step if we wanted to deal with a file? What did we have to do in the first thing? We have to open it, right? We have to request access from the operating system. So, and remember we use this file method, or this is a class, actually, which you'll know more about next quarter. And there was a method on there called open, and we gave it the name of the file that we wanted to open as our basic starting point. So we have the states.txt needs to be in the same directory as our files program here. Otherwise, we have to give path names and things to get to the file. So it's easier if we just put it in the same place for now. And what did this function return? A file object. Very good. A file object. We'll call it a states file. How about that? And so we'll assign this file object into states file. And then we can use this object to do file-y type stuff with it, right? So once it's open, and remember, what did we have to do at the end of the program? We had to close it. So now that I like to do that right away so I don't forget, we want to call the close method on the file object that we created here. Oh. All right, so we're calling the close method on our states file object, and that will release the file back to the operating system, and the operating system can play with it. So once we have it open, how did we read from a file? With a loop, okay, but how do I read the first line? Let's just take it easier to start with. Gets, right? How did we read from the keyboard? We called the gets method. So, but we need to call the gets method on the states file descriptor that I have already opened. So now I can call the gets method on that, and that will return a variable, a line representing the entire first line of the file. So we'll call it first. We'll store that. What type of data then is first? A string, yes. So I can, if I call puts on that, that's going to print it out where? To the screen. All right, so let's run this and see if it works. Alabama. So it went out, opened the file called states, read the first line of text, stuffed that into my variable called first, and now first is available. I can do whatever I want with it. Let's call inspect on it and see if I get something different. Notice that I get this /n at the end. What does that represent? A new line, a carriage return line feed. So how did we get the data without that when we were just reading from the keyboard? .chomp. So we can call the .chomp on the gets method just like before, and that will read the file from the text file, chomp it, get rid of the carriage return line feed at the end, and now first has just the string without that extraneous data in it. So now when I run it again, now that's gone. Isn't that great? That's just wonderful stuff. Awesome. All right, so there was another method. Any questions on that so far? Why won't yours work? Probably you don't have the states file in the same directory as your files. All right, so the next thing is, let's say we want to read every line of the file, and there's a bunch of them in here, but I don't know how many lines there are. There was a method that I talked about yesterday that we could use, and what was that called? The end of file, okay? So I can say, if I call the states file, everything is based on that file object. If I call EOF question mark, what does this method return? A true or false, right? So that's a binary expression. So I could put that into a loop, right? So I can say while, and what is this going to return, true or false on the first line of the file? Okay, so while false, it's going to skip all of this and quit. It won't do anything. Right, so while I'm not at the end of the file, that's how we read that, I want to do something, and then I want to end my loop. Okay, so while I'm not at the end of the file, I'm going to read a line of data from the file, stuff it into my first variable, and then print that out to the screen. All right, so that's going to continue until the operating system says, I've run out of data. I don't know what else to give you. So it's going to set this to true, and the not will make it false, and it quits the while loop. I know that sounds backwards, but if you read it like English, while I'm not at the end of the file, I want to do some stuff. When I'm at the end of the file, it's going to quit then. All right, so let's see what happens. Look at that. It read every line of data one at a time. And remember that I called gets. It moves the internal file pointers to the next line automatically for me. So I don't have to worry about skipping lines and things like that. So that printed out the string without the carriage return to the screen. All right, isn't that cool? So how might I take this data? Before that, any questions on this part? I'm opening the file, I'm reading a line at a time until I get to the end, and I'm printing it out to the screen. That's all I'm doing.
Just looking at it, it looks like you're just hitting the first one over and over again.
I am. I'm reusing this variable name. It's getting overwritten the second time with the word Alaska. And the third time, first is going to look like Arizona. So if I print it out first at the bottom, what is this going to have in it? Wyoming, right? So it'll print Wyoming twice. This is the actual variable of first, because I keep overwriting that variable. Well, it's a state. But you don't get what part?
I don't get it because you're not using a counter or something increment.
Okay. So remember that that a while loop needs three things, right? It needs an initial condition, a Boolean expression, and something that changes that condition. All right. Our initial condition is that we're not at the end of the file. This is our Boolean expression, and what inside of our loop changes this Boolean expression? My gets. So when I call the gets on this counter keeps moving forward, and this, I don't need a counter. I don't need anything at this point, because this is going to change the expression. It'll eventually turn to be true, which will dump my while loop and quit.
So ending file really just means cycle, keep cycling through till you get to the end.
Right. This entire Boolean expression means that. Yes. Is that a little not making sense yet? So I'm using this. This is just a variable. I just want to get it and print it. Each line of the file, I'm getting a new line of the file, storing it in a variable, and I'm printing it. Remember the pointer, the file pointer inside of the states object, the states file object. Every time I read a line, the internal structure goes to the next line. So it does it automatically for me. I don't know how else to explain that. There's no counter. I don't have to look at the line. I'm just reading one line at a time. The end of line character that's in this file tells me I'm done, and the pointer now points to this part. So when I do a gets again, it reads that in, and now my pointer is right before the A in Arizona. And I do another gets, it reads that in, and I moves the pointer to the next line. So that's all done automatically inside of that file structure, this file object. All right, so this is not useful because all I'm doing is reading it and printing it to the screen. But what if I want to store this data now so that I can use it later on in my program? There you go. So I need an array to stuff this stuff into. So I'm going to create a blank array called states, and that will create my blank array. And now I can, once I read the data from the file, first has the data in it. It's all chomped and ready for me to go. Instead of printing it, what should I do then? I need to put that somewhere. All right? I can do a push of the variable that I read in from the file. So every time I go through this loop, states array is going to be having a new element into it. It's going to keep appending to the end of the array. So I still don't need a counter or anything. That just all happens automatically for me. So then let's print out states.inspect so I can see what this entire array looks like. And there we go. I've got an array. You can see the square brackets followed with a bunch of strings. So every element in my array has a string in it all the way through. All right. So now states is an array. I can do state type stuff with it. States.size. I can print how many there are. I can loop through it. I can do anything I want now with it. I could say puts states sub 5, and that will print the 5th element of my states array, which is Colorado. So I have 50 states, and I printed out the 5th element, which is Colorado here. Remember, what do arrays start with? No. How do we index the arrays? Why is it printing the 6th element here? Because it starts at 0, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Any questions on that? Fairly easy to read data from a text file. I just need to do a loop similar to this and then do something with that data that I got. And in this case, I'm going to stuff it into an array. For your assignment, you're going to have to do a little more work in here and read the line. We're going to break it up into 3 pieces and then create each hash element one at a time inside of this loop. All right. Any questions on that? Yeah. Yeah, you'll have, not in my states, but you'll have to on the hash assignment.
Are you going to show us how to read CSVs now?
Yeah, we can do that. It's not that hard. Any questions on what we have so far? That stands for end of file. So we're looping through until I get to the end of the file, reading a new line each time. All right, now, as soon as I'm done with the file, I want to close that. And internally in my main program, in memory, I still have my states array. So I don't have to deal with my states file anymore. Once I've read the data in, I can close it, and my data resides in memory. All right, when I quit and run the program again, it's going to reopen the file, reload my array back into memory, etc. Just like I did if I were to load a Microsoft Word document or something like that.
Inside of the file open and file close, you wouldn't indent the loop for the array?
No, because this is a. I see. You want to do this, right? It's not really a separate. I mean, it kind of looks okay, but these are really on the same line. I mean, there's no loop or block around these two things, so I would leave it like this. There are some other methods of the file open that I can actually have a block, and then I would indent that kind of thing. But for this, these are really on the same line.
Would you set it to open automatically to an array without the loop?
I can. There's a method called readLines that I can execute on my file open, and I'll show you that. Let's call it, let's do, I don't recommend using it though, but since you asked for it, we'll show it to you. We'll have our states array, and instead of this, I'm going to do it all on one line, dot readLines. All right, so this is going to, and then I'll puts out my states.inspect. And then I better comment out the rest of it because this isn't going to work. So, all right, so what this does, it opens the file, and now what is this that I have opened? What object is this now that I've created, that I've highlighted here? It's a file object, and so I can do file object methods on it. So I can right away call this readLines method, which goes through, reads every line of the file, and stuffs it into an array. So this entire thing returns an array of every line, and so my states will have everything in it. But the problem with that is, what is the problem if you see this? It's got the carriage return line feed into it as well. So I'd have to go through another loop to get rid of those guys. No. Yeah, I'd have to loop through my states, chomp every element in the array. I mean, I don't think it's worth it. And this is easier to understand. I'm getting a piece of data. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to do something with it, and that's going to be more what you need for reading the three pieces of information from the file. So I don't recommend that. But you asked for it. You're just testing me. All right. Any other questions? So we'll leave that alone. Which one? Oh. We'll get there. Patience. Patience. All right. No questions? All right. Before we read, I want to talk about writing. Before we do more reading, let's say now my data is all in this states array. It's got 50 states, and let's say I want to add a new state to my array. All right. So how would I add a 51st state? Talk to the government, make a new one, right? So let's take over what? Egypt, right? We're going to take over Egypt, and Egypt is going to be a new state. So now when I print this out, after this fact, I should have 51, and the last state is going to be Egypt. Oh, I did something wrong. I did, didn't I? I messed it all up. Thanks. This was states file. All right, that should work. All right, so now I have 51, Alabama, and if I look at the end of my array, I've got a new element in here called Egypt. Right? So now this is where you'd have your menu-driven program. You're going to add stuff. You're going to delete states. You're going to do something with your array in memory. And then when you quit this, we need to do something with that. We need to save that data so that we don't lose all of the changes that we made. So now we need to go and figure out how to save the data back to the same file name that we started with. So we already closed the file up here. And we need to open the file again. And in this case, we need to open it in a different mode. Remember the modes that we talked about yesterday? There were 8 or 9 different modes that I could open a file in. By default, I didn't have to do anything. This is default open in read-only mode. But if I want to open it for read and write, where would I, what mode would I put this in? Oops. Let's go look at my, it was an R+, right? There you go. Let's go look at the PowerPoint anyway, just to... All right, here's all the open modes. Read only was the default. R+ is read write, but it starts at the beginning of the file.
Does that mean it overrides the comp?
It will overwrite. That's where our pointer is, our counter is. So if I do a puts there, it's going to overwrite Alabama with some other whatever I put into it.
You want to just add Egypt, shouldn't you use A+?
Well, how do I know what they've done? I want to rewrite the entire file. All right, so I'm going to open it, and I'm going to throw away all the data because I'm going to overwrite the file completely. So I want to truncate it and open it for, I could just say write only. So W, I want to open it in the W mode, and that will throw away everything on the file. And this is where I guarantee that you're going to have a problem. You will inevitably write this wrong a few times and you'll destroy your file. So now I have a file open, I close it again at the end, and instead of reading, I want to write to the file. So how would I print out every state from my states array? Puts, okay, so I'm going to, instead of just calling puts, I'm going to call my states file .puts. That says write the following string to the file instead of to the screen. So what am I going to print out? What is my putsing going to put out? My array, okay? Now, how do I print an array so that it comes out one line at a time? Well, I could just say states here, right? And because of the way the toString method works on an array, this will probably work, but this is not the way I think you should do it in your program. You won't be able to do this. So I'll do it this one way first, and then we will show you the right way to do it. So right now, my states does not have an Egypt at the end, right? And I'm going to copy this just in case I make a mistake. So let's run this. And it opens it, closes it, and the states file should now be different. Let's reopen it from here. Didn't do it. Why not? What did I do wrong? Did it work for you? What did I do wrong? States is my array. It looks right to me. Unless there's some... Oh, it's just slow. RubyMine is slow in loading it. So the synchronize should, let's see. So now I have Egypt at the bottom. So that worked. It just took a while for that to refresh the file. All right? If I run this again, what's going to happen? Right. Why is it going to add another Egypt? Well, in my beginning of my program, I'm reading every line into my states array. So my states array, if I read this file again, already has Egypt in it. Then I push another Egypt on the end of it, and write out the entire array again. So every time I run this now, it's going to add an Egypt to the end. See, I've got 52, and my array has 2 Egypts. If I run it again, I've got 53. I'm going to keep adding Egypts to the end of my file. And let's go and make sure this one works. There we go. If I right-click and say synchronize, it will reload the file from the disk. And look at all those Egypts that I have. All right, so I'm going to delete that. And let's go back and change how this really should work. All right? How do I walk through an array? How do I look at each element in an array? Each method, okay? So I would say states dot each do, and I get a single state string. And inside of that, I'm going to print out the single state one at a time, and that will print a new line and print it out to the screen, to the file the same way. But in the complicated hash that you guys have, I can't just say puts out the hash. It's not going to look right, because when I try to read it in again the next time, it's not going to be comma-separated values. So I have to do it in a loop like this. I have to do something like this. Even though this is a simple version, that's what it's going to look like.
Do you have a 11:30 class?
All right, so now let's make this a little more complicated, and let's read a file that has 2 pieces of information with a comma separating the 2 values. All right, if I were to run this program again, let's take away my Egypt so I don't mess it up all the time. And we're going to call this states_abbrev. We're going to open up that file and read it in, and we're going to write out to the same file. All right, so if I run this just as it is, what's going to happen? Right, I'm going to have a string with a comma inside of it. So I have an Alabama, comma, AL. That's one text string. So I have to break that data up into pieces so that I can do something else with it. So I'm going to comment all of this out so I don't have to worry about destroying my file yet. So I'm not going to rewrite the file. I'm just going to play with my while loop here. So I'm going to get a string. What is first going to have in it? A string, but an entire Alabama, comma, AL, right? So let's talk about reading it into a hash instead of an array. Let's call my states a hash. So first is a string. It's going to look like something like this. So how do I convert that into 2 different pieces? All right, so there is where is my, if I go look at the Ruby docs again. Oh, nice. Ruby docs, go to the core reference, look at the string class, because that's what I'm going to manipulate. And there happen to be a ton of methods. One of them is called scan. Okay? So we're going to use this scan method to search for pieces, and it returns, what type of data does it return? An array. Okay? So I'm going to scan for patterns in the string and return arrays for that. No. That's not what I want to do. I want to use the opposite of that, which is split. Same thing. It splits based on a pattern and returns me an array. So I can divide up things that have commas in them, and it will split them up into words. All right? So if I split on a comma, That's exactly what I need. Sorry about that. So I can take my first and I can say, let's just puts out first dot split, and I tell it, what do I want to split on? What character do I want to split this string up into two pieces on? On a comma, all right? So I'm going to call that, and I'm going to print that out just to show you what it looks like now. All right, so every time I print it out, I get an array because the split method returns an array of two strings, Alaska and Alabama. I mean Alabama and its abbreviation AL. Everybody got that split so far? So if I were to assign this to a variable like data, I can't think of a good name, data would be what type of variable? An array, okay? An array containing two elements, the first of which is the entire state, and the second element is the abbreviation of same, all right? So let's use that information and create a new element in my state's hash now. So how do I create a new element in a hash? No, that's when I do it, when I create the hash as hard coding it in memory. But dynamically, as I'm developing and creating new elements dynamically, how do I do that? No. It's the same as an array. How do I change an element in an array? I index it, right, by something, and I store something into that, right? So this depends on how I want my states hash to be. If I want the key to be the entire state, what element of, let's see, this is not right. This is states, sorry. So what element of data is the entire state name? Now what element, what index of data is the entire, 0, right, 0. So I can say data sub 0, this is going to have what data in it? Alabama, the string of Alabama. So that's going to create a new key in my states array, hash, sorry, and I want to assign that, the value portion of my key value pair is going to be what? What? You don't know what I just asked. Where is the AL in this data that I just split upon? There you go, data sub 1. Data sub 1 is the key, I mean the value portion, which happens to be the AL. Remember that I split this string, I split it on a comma, which gave me an array containing Alabama and AL. So data sub 0 is Alabama, data sub 1 is AL. So I'm just using those data points here to create a new element in my hash. So at the end of this, let's put out my states.inspect, and you'll see what it looks like. All right, so now it's a hash. It's a curly brace here. And I have my key and my value. Key and my value. Key and my value. Isn't that cool? Because I printed it twice. There. Is that better? There. Better? Now it'll print once. I have 59 elements, 59 rows in my hash, 59 key value pairs. And I can now use that to play around with. I can say puts out states sub Alabama. And what is that going to print? AL, very good. AL. Isn't that awesome? So using this split, I can, if I had 3 pieces of data on the same string, how many elements in my data array would there be? If I had 3, like a comma and the population or something like that. Whoa. Big long population. Then I would have, when I did a split, I'd have 3 values. Data sub 0 would be Alabama, data sub 1 would be AL, and data sub 2 would be this number. So I can do the same thing with my splits. I just have 3 pieces of data. I don't. You don't ever use a hash rocket unless you're declaring the hash hard-coded up here.
Yeah, no, but how would that show up in the hash if you had 3 values?
Well, it depends on how you use it. So in my assignment, the value portion is another array.
Oh, it's
2 pieces. So I'd have to create an array with those 2 pieces. No. No. So that's, you guys have to figure that part out. Yeah. I think it's Thursday. I don't remember. All right. Any questions on any of this?
Yeah, this is serious.
All right. We'll have to look at it afterwards. Any other questions about this? No. No. All right, so we're out of time in writing the data, but it's basically the same concept. Instead of just printing out the state, I'm going to print out the key and the value. I'm going to print out key, comma, value as a string, and it will print that to the file. So we'll do that on Monday. I'm not going to be here. Tuesday, Monday, yeah. So any other questions? I'll talk about that in a second. Any other questions? I don't want.